In a new interview with Variety, Duchess Meghan talked a lot about her current life and recent experiences, from her first public appearances after The Winfrey Show to mourning the Queen. She also mentioned her podcast and mothering habits. The Duchess of Sussex has a new glossy cover out. Meghan became Variety's heroine in light of winning the publication's award, and journalist Matt Donnelly interviewed the Duchess, preparing an obscenely laudatory article about Prince Harry's wife. It has already caused quite a bit of controversy, not only because of the content, but because of the look of the cover. Royal mourning. At the very beginning of the piece, Donnelly mentioned the Queen's death. The Duchess of Sussex is in mourning. But we'll come back to that. First, let's go back to the day we met last summer at the revered San Isidro Ranch in Montecito, California. The ranch is a humble old luxury resort with simple bungalows tucked away on a mountainside overlooking the Pacific coast. It's an unpretentious but sheltered place where wealthy locals and Los Angeles immigrants are treated like members of the royal family. One sizzling hot day in late August, however, they were able to touch the real thing. The journalist then recounted the difficulties Sussex had to face because of Her Majesty's departure. Meghan was to be honored in Variety's Power of Women 2022 class, which celebrates notable achievements of women in entertainment and media during the year. She was to be honored for both charitable and creative work, including a podcast called Archetypes, which she hosts, which was broadcast through Archewell, the company she shares with her husband, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. However, almost 3 weeks before the press release, greater than the prince's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, died at her Balmoral estate in Scotland. The world watched and mourned the burial of the longest reigning monarch in British history and celebrated what Meghan said was a shining example of female leadership. The Duchess also said her and her husband's philanthropic work helped them through the loss. All references to the late Queen in the text, of course, are given only through the lens of the heroine. After a formal period of mourning, Meghan agrees to sit down again for a lengthy discussion of her journey into the present. Matt Donnelly continues. She worries that any comments about the Queen or her relatives will distract from the ongoing mourning, but insists on glorifying the icon. She is animated as she recounts the warmth and support she has received from the thousands of citizens with whom she has interacted during her time in Britain. As many will recall, in fact, the Duchess has also met with hecklers in the United Kingdom. There was such an outpouring of love and support, Meghan states. I'm very grateful to be able to be there for my husband to support him, especially at that time. What's beautiful is looking at the legacy his grandmother was able to leave on so many fronts. Of course, in terms of women's leadership, she is the clearest example of what that looks like. I feel deeply grateful for the opportunity to spend time with her and get to know her. It was a difficult time, but my husband, who has always been an optimist, said, now she's reunited with her husband. The Duchess also mentioned the only time she and the monarch had ever been together. I reflected on that first formal engagement I had with her, how special it was. I feel lucky. And I continue to be proud that I had a nice warmth with the matriarch of the family. Documentary series on the Sussexes.
What can we expect from Liz Garbus documentaries about you and your husband? Matt Donnelly asked. The Sussexes replied, it's nice to be able to entrust my story to someone, an experienced filmmaker whose work I've long admired. Even if it means it might not be the way we would all tell it. But that's not why we tell it. We're entrusting our story to someone else, which means it will come through their lens. It's interesting. My husband has never worked in this field before. For me, having worked on Force Majeure, it's so amazing to have so much creative energy around and to see people working together and sharing their points of view. It's been really fun.
The Archetypes podcast. I didn't think I'd ever be in the entertainment industry again, Meghan said, mentioning that she finally left it in 2018. But the whole culture has changed. Streamers have made a difference. The ability to create spirit of the time moments like we had in the 90s, when everyone was tuning into a show at the same time or getting together for one moment, that doesn't happen anymore. When I did Force Majeure, this character, Rachel Zane, was with you in your living room while you were in your pajamas eating Chinese takeout. That's how the connected experience felt then. But it takes something different to create a cultural moment or conversation today. Podcasting was really interesting in that sense. It's probably one of the few remaining forums where people can listen alone. Where else do you have that opportunity? Matt Donnelly said. You are in the midst of a successful first season of Archetypes. The show destroys the harmful labels that are put on women. What are the biggest misconceptions about you? Meghan replied, I think that if you look from the outside, when there's so much noise around, what happens is that you become inhuman. But if you remember that someone is human, then you don't relate to them, don't talk about them, don't look at them the same way. My hope for archetypes is that people will think, oh, she's a real person. She laughs and asks questions and approaches everything with curiosity. When asked who was the hardest character to interview, Sussex said honestly, I talked to Paris Hilton last week. I told her at the beginning that I was most nervous about her interview. I was embarrassed to admit it, but I had formed an opinion about her based on everything I had seen, and I don't like to make judgments. But I wasn't born beautiful either. Meghan added. I was raised smart. A lot of the things I ended up thinking about when I reasoned about Paris were envy and judgment, two of the most dangerous things. But then you hear about her trauma, her life and her purchase of this persona. In the end, I told her, I'm sorry I judged you. I wanted her to be safe and comfortable. I told her I wasn't looking for a moment to catch her. I want to have a moment where we understand you. This episode is not framed as a defense of Paris, it's her humanization, Sussex continued. And that's true for everyone. I don't care what situation you're in. If a 16-year-old boy or girl or woman in the workplace feels objectified because their character is misrepresented, I hope that everyone who listens with an open mind can walk away thinking, can I just think for a second that there's a person there? I've done a lot of inner work. I'm from California, it's by the water, and when you're practicing or meditating, you're sometimes asked to imagine in your head the person who makes you angry. You think about him, you get it all, and then you're asked to think of him as a 6-year-old child. Can you forgive him? That's how I approach it. Details of her personal life. Variety's author reminded the issue's heroine of her two high-profile interviews, with Oprah Winfrey and in the New York Magazine supplement. Then Sussex explained why she shared so much detail about her personal life. The material, the cut, was meant to support archetypes and focus on our projects. I've had time to think about it. Part of me is just very trusting, very open. That's how I move in the world. I have to remember that I never want to become so full of myself that that part of me disappears. So, regardless of any of that, go for it. I can get through this. The Duchess also spoke out about her candor on her own podcasts. Part of what I do with archetypes is learning the nuances around the women who come on the show. I'm not a journalist, but I want to have a frank, real conversation with them. I talk to some really textured, vibrant, layered, dynamic women with strong stories. And that includes a lot of pieces that you may or may not choose to include. I choose to include something that I think is fair to them and also uplifting. And that teaches all of us. The interviewer asked how Meghan has been living since Oprah's show came out. She replied, even before the interview, I didn't leave the house because I was pregnant. The only thing I really remember was Gloria Steinem's birthday a few days after the show aired. I really wanted to celebrate her birthday, as I thought it would be a small and intimate dinner to celebrate her birthday. I imagined us eating sandwiches at the cottage where she was staying. But on the contrary, it was an extravaganza, by the way, as she deserved. But I really hadn't seen people in a long time, and the interview came out about a week before that. It's never easy for me to walk into a room alone, and I remember feeling a little awkward. But before I let my insecurity take over, Pamela Adlon came up to me and greeted me with such warmth and kindness. She led me around the room, and every step of the way felt more and more generous and loving. Maybe it's just a testament to the kind of company Gloria keeps, but I also think that these women were extraordinary, ensuring that I felt so welcomed. It was like they knew exactly how I needed to feel in that moment. It meant so much and still does for me. The power of sisterly relationships and female support cannot be underestimated. Busy Mom Donnelly writes, for much of her public life as Duchess of Sussex, Meghan has been described in many ways. Disingenuous, calculating, determined, outgoing and even Diana-like. But spend a day with her, and you'll see a side the public hasn't seen, the nerdy American mom. Meghan talks about how she likes to watch Jeopardy and play Wordle in bed with a glass of wine. She absent-mindedly reads her son's favorite song, the Tyrannosaurus Rex track from Ask the Storybots, and talks enthusiastically about Beyoncé, in particular, that Cozy is her favorite song from the new album. In the video, Meghan complains that she catches herself humming one of her children's songs instead of Beyoncé. What would you say if one of your kids came to you 10 or 15 years later and said, "I want a career in entertainment," Donnelly suggested. Sussex replied, "I would say, great. When you become a parent, you sincerely want your children to find things that bring them single-minded joy. Obviously, they are our children, and they are part of a heritage, a tradition, and a family that will always have different expectations. But I want them to be able to chart their own path. If it's the entertainment industry, great. And, of course, good luck. There are so many people who will talk about what opened the door for my kids. But it still takes talent and a lot of courage. We create multifaceted, interesting, kind, creative people. That's who our children are." When asked what she most wants out of life, Sussex said, "Joy. It really is. That's all we can work on for ourselves, our friends, our children, those around us. It would be so good. And we feel joy. The joy of being heard." Donnelly also asked Sussex in one really curious question, asking, "How important is it to you to be understood by other people?" The Duchess assessed him, "That's a great question. No one has ever asked me that. I can only speak for myself, but I think feeling understood and seen is really important. It was a common denominator that came up in archetypes and in my work with women's communities. People just want to be seen. This is also where representation comes into play.